Hello everybody and welcome to the 8th Castlevania Symphony of the Night Developer's Diary. In this episode we're going to be taking a look at Maria's journey through Dracula's castle, or I should say, to Dracula's castle. Now the footage you're seeing on your screen right now obviously isn't from Castlevania, but neither is it from Shinobi 3 either. It is in fact a game I coded myself from the ground up as part of my SGDK Beginners tutorial series. I'll save all the details of the tutorial series for an intro video that I'll release a few weeks from now. The good news is that the 25 or so tutorial videos I'll be releasing throughout the year have pretty much been done. That means that I can spend the rest of the year focusing my efforts on the Castlevania and Shinobi games. Right, so let's find out what a Shinobi style tutorial has to do with the first Maria level, shall we? What you're looking at now is the intro to the Saturn version of Castlevania Symphony of the Night. As soon as I saw that intro for Maria, I couldn't help but think of this level from Shinobi 3, which by the way really is from Shinobi 3, this isn't something I coded myself. It really got me thinking, what if instead of starting Maria's adventure at the entrance to the castle, we started it with the journey to the castle instead? It wouldn't be the first time a Castlevania game had started with an exciting auto-scrolling level, as you can see from this footage of the MegaDrive demo of Rondo of Blood by Master Lin Kuei and team. The first order of business was to create the graphics for the level, and thankfully in this endeavour I was helped out by Pyron. While there's no way the two background layers of the MegaDrive can compete with the multiple layers of the Saturn and PlayStation, we did have a few tricks up our sleeve. Apart from the two aforementioned background layers on the left hand side, on the right hand side you can also see a couple of large tree trunk sprites. And as you're about to see, we're going to use those tree sprites to create the illusion of more layers in front of the player. In addition to that, we can also use tile scrolling, which will be very effective in making it appear that we have more layers than we actually do. And if you're enjoying the rather psychedelic Shinobi 3 experience being displayed on your screen right now, I will be doing a tutorial on this later this year where I show you how you can achieve this effect yourself. Apart from backgrounds, we also needed sprites, of course. I did the conversion of the Maria sprite myself, and despite having to reduce the colours by a half, I think it turned out pretty well. Now let's take a look at what all those elements put together look like in action, shall we? And here we are. If you look closely at this scene, you'll see the more lightly coloured bigger trunk is at the very front, and that's moving the fastest, that's meant to be closest to the camera. And then we have these two smaller darker tree trunks which are moving a bit more slowly, and they're a bit behind that. They're appearing at random in different places each time, just to give a little more randomised look to the forest. Then we have Maria and the trees and the floor, and we also have, I shouldn't forget, the canopy at the very top, which is moving at the same speed as the two darker trees. This is supposed to be the leaves at the top of the forest, and then finally at the very back we have the darker trees in the distant background moving slowest of all. You may have noticed the occasional flicker here and there on Maria's sprite. Now the MegaDrive does have sprite limits, it's normally 80 sprites per screen. And although especially the tree trunks are very large sprites, we're not actually maxing out the sprite limit at the moment. I think we're about halfway, around 40, so I think that's maybe more of a coding bug on my part rather than a limitation of the hardware, so hopefully that's something I will fix a bit later on. Speaking of limitations, because of the way the SGDK displays backgrounds, unlike on real hardware, we have to assign one single 16 color palette to each layer of the background, so we can't mix different palettes within the same layer, and also we can't mix the priorities per tile either. We either have the foreground always appear in front of the background or vice versa. Now thankfully someone is working on, you could call it a level creation tool or a tile set tool, which will allow us to do many things within SGDK. For example, we can assign different palettes to different tiles in the background, and we can also, importantly for this scene, we can also change the priority of the foreground and background as we go down the screen, so we can mix a lot more, we can have a lot more layering of the backgrounds that way. And I hear that that tool will be releasing quite soon, early this year in fact, so as soon as I have it in my hands I'll learn how to use it, and I'll come back to this scene and add some improvements, for example putting the canopy at the top so it can go on top of the trees, because in the original the canopy is a lot lower, and I would like to make it lower and more claustrophobic in this version too. Finally, before we move on to the next scene, I just want to talk a little bit about the two enemies you see on the screen right now. So these two chaps are called the Bitter Flyers, I believe, and I think, if I'm not wrong, correct me in the comments if I am, they only appear in the reverse castle. Some people have asked whether I will be including any reverse castle assets in this game, and when it comes to backgrounds I'll say no, because I think we have plenty of those already, but when it comes to enemies there's lots of cool enemy designs that I like to bring into the game, and I thought that the flyers we have here really suit the forest level quite well. And if you're wondering why we don't have Maria jumping about and fighting like we had Shinobi on the surfboard earlier in the video, well that's simply because in the Saturn version, while she's on the horse at least, Maria was never meant to be a playable character, so we only have this basic running animation. Creating these extra attack and damage and jumping animations ourselves is going to be quite difficult, but I think it's something we're going to try to do later this year. After sticking pretty closely to the Saturn opening scene for our first part of the level, we decided to get a bit more creative for this second part. This time round I'm going to show you the footage first, and then we're going to analyse what's happening in the scene afterwards. Now I should note that I'm using the prologue music here from the PlayStation version, as we don't have the Mega Drive version of that yet, but I think it's music that's very well suited to this level. Tell me what you think yourself. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that. For anyone familiar with Shinobi 3, I think the influences from that game are obvious, especially the way the enemies first appear in the background and then only after a while they eventually appear on the same plane as the player. I've always really loved that effect because apart from giving the scene a sense of depth, it also gives the player a bit of an inkling of what's coming up, especially on a fast-paced level like this. Sometimes it's good to know what's coming up, and for this one being the beginner level of the game, I think it's especially good that we don't make it too difficult, that we make it just fun and easy. Just like last time, Pyron did the backgrounds for this scene and I did the sprites. For the Valhalla Knight I had to reduce the number of colours to just 1/3 of the original, but I think it looks quite nice. You can't really tell that 2/3 of the colours have been cut out. Thankfully, the Flea Rider was only around 15 colours anyway, so there's not much of a colour reduction here, just a bit different in the way the Mega Drive colour palette works. So here I'll take the opportunity just to show you how I created a second set of sprites for both the Valhalla Knight and also for the Flea Rider, a smaller sprite sheet just for the background sprites, so it looks like they're further away from the camera. I think that the little Flea Riders actually look pretty cute. And here's a quick look at how the two background layers are composed. To finish with, I'm going to show you two versions of the third and final part of this prologue for Maria. I'm sure some of you recognise his background from another area in the castle. Let me know in the comments if you spot which one. It's actually pretty tricky because it doesn't turn up too much, but I thought it was a nice background and I thought we could put it to some good use here. Now, I obviously did a very quick job on this one. After all, it doesn't even have a floor, so it kind of looks like Maria's horse is floating in the air. But I showed it to Pyron and that got his creative juices flowing and he decided to have a go himself. And as you've no doubt noticed yourself, the result was very impressive. Some of you may recognise the mountains from this screen. I said the previous scene had some graphics taken from other parts of the castle. Can anyone tell me where the mountains came from? Which part of the castle we got them from? I really like what Pyron has done here with the reflection in the lake. In future versions I could possibly do some kind of line scroll effect to create almost like a shimmering or a slightly moving lake to make it really look like water, but I think the very still calm lake looks quite nice too. And he asked me to do a little effect on the right at the bottom of the lake where I suppose it almost looks like there's waves or movement, so I did this with a quick palette cycle. The little touch to the scene that I added was to add a second moon in the water, so it looks like that not only are the mountains being reflected in the water, but the moon is too. So I think the effect looks quite nice. There's lots of good overlapping scrolling layers here, but the moon needs to be redrawn in the water because I just copied the one from above, and whereas the one from above blends into the sky, that makes it a little bit weird in the water. So Pyron's going to do one in the lake for me. Remember that these are all just prototypes, we're just throwing around ideas here, but despite that I think we've done some good stuff. When it comes to especially the speed of the scrolling of the clouds, of the floor, of the mountains, and this goes for the previous two scenes too, they're not finalized, so please let me know what you think. For example, in this particular scene I think the clouds and the mountains are probably moving a bit too fast. I could slow them down a lot, although I don't want to slow it down too much because it makes the scene look less dramatic, less dynamic. I'd love to see everyone's ideas of what kind of things we can include in this special level we're creating for Maria, this auto-scrolling level, especially in terms of what kind of enemies from the game will be suitable for this level. I think the ones we got so far are pretty good. I'm especially pleased we got the Valhalla horse there because I think it's in the Colosseum where he turns up in the original game. He comes at you so fast and he dies so quickly that you don't really get the chance to see his beautiful animation, so I'm glad we're going to get to see more of him here. But any ideas of backgrounds and gameplay and also enemies we could use for these levels, then please let me know. Before I leave you, I'd just like to thank everyone for their feedback and bug reports from the recent Christmas Castlevania game. One particularly funny one was noticed by one of our musicians, Engelbard, where he said that you can effectively do this wall climb if you keep pushing the D-pad side to side as you jump, and so it looks quite funny. You can actually jump over the wall, so if you do happen when you meet death, then he advises you not to go and attack your father. If you think he has a good point, he's been very reasonable, you can turn around and go home. I've collected all of the feedback and bug reports from the comment section into a text file, and one day, not too soon, but in the future, I'll go through them one by one and just fix all the bugs. Maybe I'll leave the little wall climbing. I'm not sure yet. I haven't decided. The next Castlevania Developer's Diary will be arriving in a few weeks, and it will be dealing with part 2 of the Shadow and Highlights mode. So this one will be dealing with the background shadow and highlight mode, whereas before we had a look at the sprite based shadow and highlight. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and until next time,
farewell.